Good morning, everyone. Sawadee Kap. I'll just officially welcome all of you guys to Wat Tung. Welcome to our class. Welcome to those of you guys that are here, and welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, where we study the original words of the Buddha more as a study group, where we have foundational classes where we teach and help you build up your understanding of the teachings of the Buddha through courses and retreats and things like that. This particular class is more about a study group, and I'll show you guys how this goes as we get going in our class today. But I'd like to just welcome all of you guys. We start with meditation in each of our classes, so I'll guide you guys in a breathing mindfulness meditation to get us started, and then we'll talk about what we're planning to learn today. So if you'd like to join for the breathing mindfulness meditation, what I typically do is I ease into the meditation with the chanting. There's certain chants that we do, and this is in the Pali language. The Pali language is the original source language of the teachings of the Buddha, and if you'd like to see these Pali chants, they're on a laminated sheet over there on the table. You guys are welcome to get one if you like. It even has the English translations on there. You guys can chant along even if you'd like. Maybe Steve, actually, he'll probably hand them out. He's usually does that as part of coming to the temple, so he'll hand these out for you guys. You'll see the Pali chants and then the English translations as well. And if you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of gratitude and respect and admiration for the Buddha. I don't suspect the Buddha actually created these chants himself. They were probably created by his students, either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha doesn't walk around, an enlightened being doesn't walk around with a bunch of arrogance and ego and kind of instructing people to chant to them. So the Buddha would have shared teachings with people to help them get to enlightenment. And getting to enlightenment means that your mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. So if you had someone that helped you do that, and they didn't want anything from you, they didn't expect anything from you, they just guided you to this enlightened mental state where your mind's permanently peaceful and joyful, you'd probably have a lot of respect for that person too. So I suspect his students created these either during his life or after his death. And during his lifetime, he used chanting as a way to help his students commit the teachings to memory, because everything he taught was oral. So he would just teach and teach and teach and teach, and then every 2 weeks the students would come together and they would recite chants like this in the Pali language or whatever language they were using, and they would chant, and this is how they committed them to their memory. So today we don't need to chant in order to commit teachings to memory. We have books, we have videos and podcasts and audiobooks and things like this, but I still chant as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. It brings awareness of the mind, awareness of the breath, helps you get more benefit out of the meditation. So if you'd like to chant along, you're welcome to. There's various courses and retreats where I actually teach people how to chant, but today we're just going to do the chanting just to kind of ease us into the meditation. And then if you ever take one of those courses, you can learn how to do the chanting. And then after the chanting, I'll provide you some guidance in the meditation itself. You hear me guiding you as we're meditating, but then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're just all going to be meditating together. You won't hear me guiding you at all because you need to do the work to actually meditate. I'm sure you'll hear maybe a car go by, or maybe a bird or a dog or something like this, but these sounds are all impermanent. You're not going to ever be in an environment where it's permanently quiet, so you'll need to get used to meditating when you hear occasional sounds. But what you'll do is just bring your mind back to the breath each time. Don't allow your mind to wander. You'll hear how I guide you during the meditation. After that period of time where we're all meditating together, those of us here and everyone online, then at the end we'll come out with the chanting as well, and that's where we'll start our class with the study group. So if you'd like to join along, there's typically 4 positions that you're doing breathing mindfulness meditation in. It's seated, lying, standing, and walking position. And these are all positions that I teach at different times, but typically when people are just getting started, they learn in the seated position. So either on the floor, in a chair, on a bench, on a sofa, anywhere you'd like to sit. It's not about everybody sitting in one particular way, because every single body is different. So we're going to find different things to be comfortable. So I can give you some guidance on kind of some pointers about how you can maybe make the body more comfortable, because you're not interested in any physical pain during your meditation. So if you're on the floor, you might just have your legs lightly crossed, whereas if they're real tight, you'll impede the circulation, and this will cause pain in the lower body. And some people even like to put their legs off the mat, and this gets your hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. So this might be something that you decide to use. With the hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everybody doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here as well. You could put your palms on your thighs, on your knees. You could put your palms up. You could place them comfortably in your lap. It's really up to you, whatever's comfortable with your lower body and the hands and arms. And for those of you guys that are in chairs or a sofa or a bench or something like this, usually people put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles. And then again, the hands and the arms wherever is comfortable. But you can do whatever you like. You know, I'm sitting in a chair here. This is just a chair and I'm sitting with my legs crossed. So it's really up to you, whatever is comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation, and by keeping the upper body erect, it'll help you with that. And also by having the sternum up and the shoulders back, this will help you breathe in through the nose and out through the nose, getting some nice fresh air, so that way you can have some nice, steady, consistent breaths. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with chanting, which you guys are welcome to join along in, and then I'll be back with some guidance to help you in the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Wat Tung Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawap Manusanang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in, in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมโมโนสกาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly ease your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys here at the temple. Sawadee Kap, welcome. Good morning to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone online as well, including those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating. For those of you guys that this is your first time at the temple, I'll just give you a couple of pointers of things that can help you feel more comfortable while you're here at our space. Is that in the back of the room, the very last door on the right, there's a bathroom. You're welcome to use it at any time. Feel free to get up and use the restroom. There's even bathrooms outside the classroom. If you go outside the classroom, you'll see the signs that take you to the main temple bathroom. So you'll feel free to get up and use the restroom at any point. We have one here. We have a larger bathroom outside the classroom. And then we even have water and things here that are provided by our students. You're welcome to help yourself. I've even seen snacks showing up over the last few weeks. Some students are putting some snacks over there. So feel free to help yourself and enjoy anything that you like. Make yourself comfortable here at the temple. So this meditation that we did is called breathing mindfulness meditation. This is a primary form of training that the Buddha used in addition to other things in order to move his mind to enlightenment. You would need meditation in order to get to enlightenment, but you can't just meditate your way to enlightenment. There's much more that you need besides meditation. And that's why after we meditate, then I share teachings with you to be able to help you understand more guidance on the path to enlightenment. What enlightenment is it's where the mind has been trained and purified of the causes and conditions that are producing discontent feelings. There are certain discontent feelings that you experience in day-to-day life in the unenlightened state. You experience anger and sadness and frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, displeasure, all these feelings in others, you don't have to experience these. You can actually eliminate these from the mind. But in the unenlightened state, you lack the wisdom of how to actually do that. And that's what a Buddha does, is a Buddha figures out how to get to this enlightened mental state by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. And then they make themselves available to help countless people get to enlightenment during their lifetime. And then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment after their death. So a Buddha can get to enlightenment by themselves, but you would need teachers and guides to be able to help you along your journey. So that's what a teacher does, is they're kind of like a tour guide. They're kind of pointing out to you the things that you need to learn and grow and develop on your way to enlightenment, but it's you as the individual that's choosing to do the work. What you're doing is you're learning teachings, you're examining them, you're investigating them, you're reflecting on those teachings to independently verify them, and then you're practicing them by integrating them into your life. The teachings of the Buddha, they're not a bunch of beliefs. You don't believe a bunch of things and then hope something good happens when you die. They're also not rules and commandments that if everybody follows these rules, that the world will become a peaceful place. Instead, he's not teaching you the way the world should be. He's teaching you the way the world is. And when you understand the way the world is, you'll navigate this world more readily, understanding these natural laws. But when you don't understand the natural laws that the Buddha taught, you'll struggle and you'll have difficulties in the world. This is why the anger and the sadness and the frustration is coming into the mind, because the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It lacks wisdom. So you can get to a point where you're learning his teachings, you're reflecting on those to independently verify, and you're practicing and you're acquiring this wisdom of the natural laws around you. And now you'll navigate the world more readily and with ease without this stress and anxiety and all these other discontent feelings. But it takes gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You can't just instantly get to enlightenment. This is one of the biggest myths in the life story of the Buddha. People think that he sat down under a tree, he meditated, and he instantly got to enlightenment. And this just isn't true. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. If you study the original words of the Buddha, you can see where he says this very clearly. He says that it wasn't instantaneous that he got to enlightenment, that it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And you know that to be true because everything you've ever done in life has been the same way. It's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Whether it's learning how to read, write, and speak English or Chinese or any other language that you know, it's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. If it's your job or occupation, same thing. It's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Everything you've ever learned in life has been that way. So enlightenment is the same way. It's this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So we have various courses and retreats here to be able to help you to be able to learn and grow and develop. And you can learn here at the temple, but as you travel throughout the world, we also live stream our classes. So you can join by YouTube or Facebook or Zoom. There's people joining us now. And even if you can't attend live, they're recorded so you can watch them at any time that you like. We have books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts. You can get personal guidance. All of these things are available to you at no cost, because these discontent feelings that you experience, it's no fun. Right? It's no fun being frustrated and agitated and annoyed and feeling shy and resentful or having anxiety in social situations. It's not fun. But getting to enlightenment and purifying the mind, that's actually fun. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's peaceful and joyful. Your mind is at ease and you can enjoy life with this enlightened mental state. So as you decide that you might be interested to learn and grow and develop on the path to enlightenment, there's resources and help here to help you along the path. Today's class, this morning at least, is called our Pali Canon and English Study Group. This is oftentimes a program that students move into after they've learned some of the foundational classes and some of the foundational material. If this is your first time here, which many of you I know it is, it's okay. You'll still learn plenty of things today, but just understand the things that we discuss. It's more like a study group in this particular class versus the other courses and retreats that I teach where it's more traditional style of learning, where I'm teaching you and teaching you and teaching you for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I open up to questions, and then I teach for another 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions, where today it's more of us studying the teachings of the Buddha together as a study group, and you'll see what that is. I have various programs here. We have the group learning program, which is a 7-month program. It takes the first book of our book series and it goes chapter by chapter every Sunday. It's a 7-month program. You can attend here at the temple. You can attend online. I teach it at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning and 9 p.m. Sunday evening. I do it from home. So no matter where you are in the world, you should be able to find a live class, either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. Thai time. And then where you can't attend the live class, it's recorded. And then we also have that same group learning program on Wednesdays as well. And then on Sundays, we have this Pali Canon and English study group, which goes through volumes 2 all the way through volumes 13 of the book series. This takes a year and a half to go through and gradually learn all that content. And then that's at Saturday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. as well. And you can attend here or you can attend online. And then we have courses. We have a course starting this Monday, which is a foundational course. It's Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., which helps you to build up a foundation in the path to enlightenment. And today at 1 p.m. until 4, we have an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. It's a 3-hour course where you're just getting kind of introduced to the teachings of the Buddha, and you're learning from the very beginning of his teachings. But today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be studying these individual chapters. You can see these chapters right now. We're actually coming towards the end of our program because we're in volume 12, chapter 41, and we're going to be going all through 50. But today we may or may not have time to get all the way through all the chapters. In the evening when I teach, I go through all the 10 chapters, but we study 10 chapters a week. Students will oftentimes be reading these books either before class or after class. And then when they come to class, it's more of a study group. And what we do is we have a student will read the chapter, and these chapters are actually quite short. You can see here, this one is just maybe like a half a page here. And then what happens after the student reads, then I will share some teachings on that for maybe 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes or so. And then I open up to any questions that you guys have. So like I mentioned, this is more of a study group where all the other things that we do, it's more of a traditional style of learning. But you can still learn this way. Even if you haven't studied the foundational teachings of the Buddha, I teach it in such a way that it'll help you to be able to learn what it is that the Buddha is teaching. But typically, people will start kind of in a foundational program. So I'll show you guys how this goes. If you guys would like to volunteer to read this particular chapter, either here at the temple or those of you guys in Zoom, all you need to do at the temple is get a microphone here in the white bowl. We have 6 different microphones. And if you use the microphone, you just press the gray button on the front. The lights will come on. You hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online too. They wouldn't be able to hear you online if you didn't use the microphone. And then if you'd like to keep the microphone with you, someone around you might have a question, or they might volunteer to read, so you can just keep the microphone with you. And then for those of you guys on Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand. I'll be able to see that, and you can open up your microphone, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you on the live stream, and you can read this chapter as well. And then, like I mentioned, after somebody reads, then I'll share a little bit of teachings on that, and then I'll open up to any questions you guys have. And as you're asking questions, if you could use the microphones here as well. And for those of you guys on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your questions into the comment section, and I'll see it here. Or those of you guys in Zoom, you can raise your hand for questions and open up your microphone, and we'll be able to hear you as well. So is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? Someone's going to break the ice. Go ahead, Steve. I saw you. Steve likes to break the ice.
Misunderstanding regarding listening to the Great Birth Sermon. An Arahant, fully enlightened Buddha named Maitreya by the words of the Buddha. The words of the Buddha in the Pali Canon illustrate the arising of an Arahant, fully enlightened Buddha named Maitreya, that states, "And in that time of the people with an 80,000-year lifespan, there will arise in the world a fortunate one, an Arahant, fully enlightened Buddha named Maitreya, endowed with wisdom and conduct, a welfarer, knower of the worlds, incomparable trainer of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and fortunate, just as I am now. He will thoroughly know, having realized it by his own experience, and proclaim this universe with its heavenly beings and Maras and Brahmas, is ascetics and Brahmins, and this generation with its princes and people, just as I do now. He will teach the teachings, lovely in its beginning, lovely in its middle, lovely in its ending, in the spirit and in the letter, and proclaim, just as I do now, the holy life in its fullness and purity. He will be attended by a company of thousands of monks, just as I am intended by the company of hundreds. This was all the words.
It's still on. Oh, it's not. We lost it.
This was all the words of the Buddha mentioned in the Pali Canon regarding the Arahant, fully enlightened Buddha named Maitreya.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, Gotama Buddha, who lived over 2,500 years ago, he was born in 563 BC. He died in 483 BCE. He got to enlightenment by himself. He taught his teachings for 45 years, from the age of 35 to 80, and then he died in 483 BC. And during his lifetime, he shared countless teachings to help people get to enlightenment. During his lifetime, everything was taught orally, but after his death, they wrote teachings down, and this is assembled into what we call the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is 45 volumes of books. These books are about this thick, and they document what the Buddha taught during his lifetime. This is the largest, most complete collection that we have of the teachings of the Buddha. And now they've been translated into English, and that's this book series. I have countless teachings that have been consolidated from this Pali Canon, because in the 45 volumes of books, it would probably take you a good 10 years to read all of those books, not to mention actually learning it and investigating it and reflecting on it and practicing it. It would take quite a while. There's a lot of repetition, because when you're teaching in an oral tradition, the way that you get people to remember what it is that you're teaching is the first thing you do is you create lists. Right? This is why we got the 5 precepts, the 10 fetters, the Eightfold Path, the 7 factors of enlightenment, things like this. The Buddha created a lot of lists, because if you remember, 4 of the precepts, you're like, I know there's a 5th one. I know there's a 5th one. What is it? Right? So you create lists. You also tell stories. You'll see that the Buddha tells certain stories, analogies, or similes. This helps people to remember, because they'll remember your teachings if you tell stories. But you also repeat things over and over and over and over again. So in the Pali Canon, we've got a lot of repetition. So you can read 100 pages of the Pali Canon, and there can be like one sentence that's changing, and it's just repeating over and over and over and over and over again. So this book series that I share, it consolidates the Pali Canon into smaller version of books that are actually manageable and digestible, that you could kind of more easily read and understand and practice the teachings of the Buddha. Well, in those teachings of the original source teachings, the Buddha refers to this Buddha that is to arise in the future. And here, this is what's in the Pali Canon. He's describing this individual who is going to arise during a period of time where human beings have a lifespan of 80,000 years. And what he's talking about here is not that an individual will have a lifespan of 80,000 years, but from the time that the Maitreya Buddha, Maitreya means loving kindness. This Buddha is to have a lot of loving kindness for the world, that from that point forward, humanity has another 80,000 years to live life. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, he knew that his teachings would reach the entire world, but it wouldn't be during his lifetime. It would be during the lifetime of Maitreya Buddha, where the teachings could come into the world and reach an international audience. And now we're at that point in time where the Buddha described that this actual new Buddha would arise in the world. There's other discourses that you can find in the Chinese canon. For example, the Chinese people have additional teachings that the Pali Canon doesn't actually have, where the Buddha actually lays out a particular time frame of when this actual Buddha is going to arise. And he gives the date of 2,500 years after his death, essentially, that this new Buddha would arise. And a new Buddha arising would be very wonderful for the world, because this person would have a lot of wisdom to be able to help people to get to enlightenment. And from the time that that person arises forward, there's going to be another 80,000 years for humanity to exist in the world. And the Buddha knew that the entire world would get to enlightenment. And now we're in that time where this is actually possible, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, there wasn't an international language that the entire world understood. So any new Buddha that would arise nowadays would teach in an international language that the entire world would be able to understand. So we have certain conditions that exist now that allow a Buddha to come into the world world and then share the teachings worldwide. That we have an international language that all of humanity can understand. Like here in this room, we have people from China and Belgium and Canada and Australia and America and India and different places. I don't know where all of you guys are from, but we have an international community here learning in an international language. So this is one of the criteria that needed to be in place that didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. We also have travel, that we can travel all through the world. Within about 24 to 48 hours, we can be pretty much anywhere in the world, which didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. He wasn't able to travel that easily to be able to share his teachings worldwide. And then the third thing that we have that didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha is we have the internet. We can press a button and we can send information from one end of the globe all the way to the other in an instant. And this is what would need to be in existence for a Buddha to come into the world and share the teachings worldwide, is an international language, the ability to easily travel, and the ability to easily send information from one end of the globe to the other. So we have the ability for these teachings to be restored in the world in such a way that countless people can get to enlightenment. And these teachings can get to a point where more and more we have enlightened beings in the world functioning more and more as an enlightened being, which would mean the world will become very peaceful and very joyful as each individual chooses on their own to be able to get to enlightenment. And from that point forward, the world would have another 80,000 years. And if you do the math from when the Buddha died until he shared that this new Buddha would arise, this equals the year 2017 that a new Buddha would arise. And that was just 7 years ago. So understand that a new Buddha arising in the world, they're not going to get on the news and proclaim that they're a Buddha and, okay, here I am now, please come learn with me. Instead, a new Buddha, if they're wise enough to get to enlightenment by themselves, they're also wise enough to start sharing their teachings without anybody needing to know that they are a Buddha. Because a actual Buddha, one of the powers that they have is that nobody knows that they're an actual Buddha. If countless people knew that they were an actual Buddha, it actually renders their ability to help people not as strong as it would be if people didn't know who they were. If everybody knew, like say there was a kind of like a turned ear or a certain, physical feature, maybe their nose is turned a certain way and everybody would know like, oh, that's a Buddha. Well, in that situation, if everybody knew who the Buddha who it was, they would be on their best behavior when they're around that individual. One of the powers that a Buddha has is they're able to understand the mind of other human beings by observing the various fetters or pollutions or taints that person has in their mind. And if everybody just functions normally without knowing that this person is a Buddha, then that person who is a Buddha can observe the mind of their students and then be able to provide them teachings in a way that would be much more helpful for them. Whereas if people were kind of on their best behavior around this person because they knew that this person was a Buddha, then that person wouldn't be able to see the natural state of their mind and then share teachings with them. So any Buddha that is in the world, they're not interested in fame, they're not interested in fortune, they're not interested in a bunch of people knowing who they are, because they're actually able to help people more if they don't know who they actually are. Because a Buddha's goal is to bring the teachings into the world in such a way that countless people can get to enlightenment. And the way that you do that is by helping people to get to enlightenment, by more and more people getting to enlightenment. This is what preserves the teachings. Because once you get to enlightenment, the wisdom that you experience in order to get to enlightenment, you will never forget that wisdom. The wisdom that it took for you to go from the anger and the sadness and frustration and all those discontent feelings to the peace and the joy that is the enlightened mind, you'll never forget that wisdom that it took for you to get there. Your mind will be performing optimally by the time you get to enlightenment. Not only have you eliminated discontent feelings, but you also have focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory. Your personal, professional relationships will really blossom. You're not even in a bad mood anymore. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're not even in a bad mood. You don't get exhausted or tired. You get sleepy, you need to sleep, but you don't get exhausted or tired. Like sometimes at the end of your day, you might get home and you feel like you're just dragging yourself into your home. And this is because the mind's burdened with certain pollutions that are in the mind. But you can get to a point where you're not even exhausted or tired, that your mind is bright and radiant and uplifted. So any Buddha coming into the world that would exist in the world, they wouldn't go around wanting other people to know that they're an actual Buddha. They would just be interested in sharing their teachings and be able to help people get to enlightenment. And this is how people were able to write down the teachings of the Buddha after his death, that there was countless people that had gotten to enlightenment during his lifetime. So about 500 of those enlightened beings got together shortly after the death of the Buddha, and they started documenting his teachings, and they wrote them down. And that's what we have now in the Pali Canon. But the Pali Canon doesn't have everything that you would need in order to get to enlightenment. And the status of the Pali Canon is not really pure the way it was over the last several years. So any Buddha coming into the world would need to update this Pali Canon and make the words more accurate and help it to reflect what it's really going to take in order to get to enlightenment. Because the natural laws that the Buddha taught during his lifetime are the same natural laws that exist today. They haven't changed. The natural laws don't change from one time frame to another. So the teachings of the Buddha, they're not stuck in a cultural past that denigrate people or disrespect people. You won't see that. You'll see people that say that that's what the Buddha taught, but you won't see that in the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha never denigrates anybody. He never talks down about anybody. His teachings aren't based in a cultural past. He's describing teachings that are timeless. These natural laws that he taught, they're timeless, and you can understand what he taught 2,500 years ago, and those teachings apply today too, because he's describing these natural laws, and these natural laws haven't changed. So as you gradually awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws, this is where the mind functions more optimally. You get the pollutions out of your mind, and now you'll see the peace and joy coming through and experiencing more and more qualities of the enlightened mind. So here the Buddha is just kind of referencing this new Buddha that is going to essentially restore the teachings back into the world and bring them into the world. And you can see some of the qualities that he's talking about here of this individual. This name Maitreya, it refers to loving kindness. This refers to metta, which is a Pali word, and this is a loving kindness. So this Buddha, in order to share teachings, you would need to have a deep amount of loving kindness and compassion for the world, because a Buddha is going to let go of any worldly life that they have, and they're going to fully be involved in sharing the teachings in the world and helping people. And that takes a certain amount of loving kindness and compassion. Loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill. And compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. So to give up a career or give up a life like that and fully get involved in sharing the teachings and living the life of a teacher who's sharing the teachings of the Buddha, it would require a significant amount of loving kindness and compassion for others to do that. And that's one of the reasons why the Buddha referred to him as Maitreya. And you can see some of the other qualities that he talks about here. He talks about teachings that are lovely in the beginning, lovely in the middle, and lovely in the ending. This is the way the Buddha taught to teach, that when you're teaching as a teacher, you shouldn't start off really strong and then kind of fade off towards the end of your class, or start off kind of weak and then get really strong in the middle and then fade off at the end. He talked about that when you start teaching, it should be good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. So that way that the students can be involved and understand and learn what it is that you're sharing. So here the Buddha is saying, okay, just like me, just like I'm teaching now, this particular Buddha is going to teach in the same way that I'm teaching as well. Do you guys have any questions on this particular chapter? Remember, for those of you guys online, you can put them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom, or those of you guys here, you're welcome to ask questions as well. Any questions you guys have? Yes, sir. If you could get this mic, Steve's going to pass it up for you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you mentioned that this newly arisen Buddha would not be recognized as such, right, in this lifetime. But the Buddha himself, like the original, Gotama Buddha, would have been recognized as being the Buddha at the time when he lived, right?
Not necessarily. So a Buddha, like I mentioned, there's no physical characteristics that determine that this person's a Buddha versus this person's a Buddha. It's all about what's going on in the mind and how they actually got to that. So not everybody knows how to identify an enlightened being, and not everyone knows how to identify a Buddha. So during his lifetime, while he was a Buddha, and there were plenty of people that knew he was a Buddha, there were also plenty of people who didn't. Because a Buddha doesn't perform a bunch of miracles to try to convince people that they're a Buddha, because their teachings are independently verifiable, so they don't need to perform a bunch of miracles to convince people who they are, and they're not even interested in doing that anyway. So what they do is they just start sharing their teachings. They usually perform one miracle, which a Buddha would have done, performed one miracle for certain people that are influential to help them, and then from that point forward, they would just start sharing their teachings, and then their teachings are independently verifiable from that point forward. So the Buddha did this, and any new Buddha would do this as well, where they would perform one miracle for a select group of people, and then from that point forward, they would just start sharing their teachings with countless people to be able to get to enlightenment. Because the three criteria of what it takes to be identified as a Buddha, they don't all come into existence until the person has died. Because the first criteria is that you need to get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then you need to dedicate the rest of your life to sharing your teachings, your independently discovered teachings, with countless people during your life. And then countless people need to get to enlightenment during your lifetime. And then you need to preserve your teachings in such a way that after you die, countless more people will get to enlightenment after you die. So during the lifetime of a Buddha, people who are studying with a Buddha, after they get to a certain point in their development, if they know the background of their teacher, that they don't have any teachers or any guides, and they can see that their teachings are clear, they're concise, they're precise, they're helping you to get to enlightenment, and you can see the condition of your minds improving to get to enlightenment, there will be teachers during the life, or there'll be students during the lifetime of a Buddha, that those students will know, like, this person is a Buddha. But not the whole world. The whole world won't know. It'll just kind of slowly spread over time that this person is a Buddha. But that person who is a Buddha, they're not interested in other people knowing that they're a Buddha. Gotama Buddha, he did let people know that he was a Buddha, because people didn't know he was the first Buddha. So humanity didn't know what a Buddha was during his lifetime. So he had to let people know that he was a Buddha. But most often he would refer to himself as the Tathagata. He didn't even refer to himself as a Buddha. What the word Tathagata is it means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth. And he referred to himself this way. He would refer to himself as the Tathagata. You'll probably see it here as we get going in the class. But he did occasionally refer to himself as a Buddha and let people know that he was a Buddha, because he needed to let humanity know what a Buddha is. But today, if somebody walked around claiming that they were a Buddha, right away people were like, no way. Because an enlightened being doesn't have an ego. And if you're claiming you're a Buddha, you have an ego, and therefore you couldn't even be enlightened. So how could you be a Buddha, right? But during the lifetime of the Buddha, there wasn't worldwide fame. There wasn't this idea of like, worshipping somebody. So like in the teachings of the Buddha, there's no worship, there's no rites or rituals and ceremonies and worship or anything like this. So today, if somebody claimed that they were a Buddha, people would be like, that person wants admiration. They want people to bow down to them. They've got ego. So a Buddha would be wise enough to know not to walk around and claim that they are a Buddha. There's enough people on the face of the earth today that they know how to identify a Buddha, particularly here in Thailand. They know how to identify an enlightened being. They know how to identify a Buddha. So a Buddha doesn't need people to know that he's a Buddha in order to be effective. He can actually be a lot more effective by people not knowing that he's a Buddha. So any new Buddha that exists today wouldn't be interested in other people knowing that they're a Buddha. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am. Your friend has a question as well.
I have two questions.
Sure.
First one is that, so the time that the Buddha said the next Buddha will come is 2017. So you mean there is one new Buddha, or there are maybe multiple people?
There's only one new Buddha. There can only ever be one Buddha in the world at a time.
Okay.
It's very rare for a Buddha to exist in the world. The last one that the world currently is aware of was 2,500 years ago, and there hasn't been a Buddha since him that the world knows about. But based on the dating of when the Buddha shared that a Buddha would arise, he gave these 500-year cycles. And if you look at these 500-year cycles that he described, human evolution happened exactly the way that he talks about in his teachings. And we just ended that last 500-year cycle in 2017. And in 2017 would have been the date that the Buddha gave of this 2,500-year period, because he died in 483 BCE. And then if you do the math, 2,500 years is 2017, he said that this Buddha would appear, meaning they would start making themselves available or aware to other people. And this is a time frame where perhaps this Buddha would have performed a miracle for certain people to help those people know that this person is an actual Buddha. And then from that point forward, they would just be sharing their teachings in a way that would help countless people to get to enlightenment. And if you look at these 500-year cycles, it's really interesting because he talks about this first 500-year cycle where lots of people are getting to enlightenment. The second 500 years, people were practicing meditation and really interested in meditation. Then the third 500 years, people would be writing scholarly works about his teachings. And this is what we see, that we see a lot of scholars were writing about what he taught during that time frame. The fourth 500-year period, he said people would be really good with generosity with his teachings, that they would be sharing gifts and things like this. And this is actually when all the temples were pretty much built in Thailand. From 500 to 1,000 years ago is when you'll see all these temples were built because people were donating land and resources and all these things to build and construct all these temples. And then the last 500 years, he said that people would be utterly confused about what he taught, and they would be arguing and fighting, and people would be very confused about what it is that he actually taught. And this is the reason why a new Buddha would need to come into the world to sort all that out. Because a Buddha getting to enlightenment by themselves, they would have no teachers or any guides. They would know exactly how to get to enlightenment, and their teachings would be very penetrating, very precise, and very concise. And then slowly but surely, the people who are interested in learning would be able to get to enlightenment, but they wouldn't necessarily know that that person's a Buddha. So you would see more and more and more people getting to enlightenment. By the time this person dies, you would just see more and more and more people getting to enlightenment. And then ultimately, by the time they die, their teachings would be preserved for others to get to enlightenment too.
Thanks. So you may have already answered my second question. Yeah, my second question is that how does new Buddha know he's the new Buddha? Is it by himself without any guidance? He got the enlightenment, so then he knows.
Yes. So getting to enlightenment, you will have purified your mind of what's called the 10 fetters. These are the 10 individual pollutions that are in the mind. And when you do so, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. So you would know 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're not agitated, you're not annoyed, you're not frustrated, you're not resentful or jealous or lonely or bored or any of these other discontent feelings. And if you've done that on your own without the help of any teachers or any guides, you would know that you're meeting the first criteria of a Buddha. But then you would need to share your independently discovered teachings with countless people getting to enlightenment, and you would need to preserve those teachings in such a way that countless more people would get to enlightenment. So even if you get to enlightenment, you would know that you've gotten to enlightenment, but you wouldn't be a Buddha at that point because you're going to need teachers and guides to help you. There's a certain quality that an individual who's going to become a Buddha has in their mind, which is very different and unique than the average person. For you, the average person, you're going to have a certain capacity in your mind to remember certain things, right? So like you remember like the last 5 years of your life, you kind of remember pretty well. But if you go back to your childhood, you just have kind of like spotty memories about things that are going on in your childhood. And that's because you have a limited capacity, kind of like a hard drive. You have maybe like 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte of space in your mind. And when you experience new things, you need to delete old files in order to store new files. So that's why you just have spotty memories of things from the past, because you've had to delete those files in order to store new files. But a person who's going to become a Buddha, their mind doesn't function that way. They have an unlimited capacity. They can remember countless details from their current life in their past life too. In all their past lives, they accumulate all this wisdom to their last life where they can now get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides, because they've accumulated all this wisdom for so many lifetimes. And it's still possible for the average person to be able to see their past lives, but you don't usually have as much direct recall as an individual who's going to become a Buddha. They don't have an unlimited capacity, so they can acquire all this wisdom, and now in their last life, they can figure out how to get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. And that's what makes their wisdom so penetrating and so deep, because they've done it themselves.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me just check online, see if we have any questions here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online. So let's go to the next one. Is there someone, by the way, what you have here in all of these chapters is you have the words of the Buddha. You have a reference here, which takes you back to the original Pali Canon, that you can see what the Buddha was teaching either before this or after this, right? And then you've got words from me. In this particular chapter, these words aren't from me, but all the others, you pretty much have words from me that'll help you to be able to further understand the teachings. The Buddha, as you see, he teaches very clear, very concise, very precise, right? Like you don't really need somebody to interpret his teachings or help you figure them out. But some of his teachings, they're connected to other teachings that you might not have explored yet. So having an experienced teacher to be able to help you understand how that particular teaching relates to other teachings and how to integrate it into your life is really helpful. And all these books are available for you at no cost. You can go to our website and download them for free. You can take them and go print them if you like. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing cost. Or if you have access to Amazon in your country, you can order them from Amazon as well. So these are widely available for you, which wasn't the case previously, because these teachings have been locked away for a really long time in these 45 large volumes of books. Even the average Thai person, the average Thai temple, doesn't even have access to the teachings of the Buddha because it's so expensive to print them out in those 45 books. So this consolidated book series actually makes it much more accessible to you. And with the internet, we can now download these and they can be widely available for you. So you can get access to these if you'd like to read them. Okay, so here's where you see some words from me. I'm explaining what is a Buddha. I'm explaining why will Maitreya Buddha not share with the public that he is a Buddha. Let's see, there's other things that I share here as well. Okay, that's it for that particular chapter. So here, this is, we're going through a couple of chapters here in this particular book towards the end of the book series, which are misunderstandings about the teachings of the Buddha. Because like I just mentioned, the vast majority of the world, there's about 500 million people who consider themselves Buddhist. They don't actually study with the original words of the Buddha. That might be surprising to you, particularly if you come from like a Christian background or if you've ever studied like Muslim teachings or something like this, because in Christianity, people have access to the Bible. It's really accessible. It's like one book. And, even in places like where I grew up, you can go to a hotel and like all the hotel rooms have a free Bible in the hotel room, right? Where you would think like the words of the Buddha would be widely available all over the world and everybody who considers themselves Buddhist must be studying the original words of the Buddha. But this isn't actually true because the teachings are in these 45 volumes of books. The average person doesn't actually have access to them. The average collection of the Pali Canon, it would cost about 3 months of your salary as a Thai person to be able to have the Pali Canon. And you probably don't own any book collections that are worth 3 months of your salary. So that's why the average Thai person, the average Thai temple doesn't actually have the Pali Canon accessible to them. So we have a lot of misunderstandings in the world, not just here in Thailand, but all throughout the world. You'll see a lot of misunderstandings. So this book series helps you to be able to get access to the original words of the Buddha, and you can see what the actual original words are. Here, I'm not going to have you guys read this because this some of it isn't the words of the Buddha, but what this is explaining that this transference of merit is a misunderstanding of the teachings of the Buddha. What transferring merit is that let me first talk about what merit is. What merit is when you make an offering to a teacher or to an ordained practitioner. When you make this offering, you're acquiring merit. What merit is wholesome karma. Wholesome karma is this cause and effect or action and result. When you make a wise decision, it's going to produce wholesome karma. Or when you make an unwise decision, it's going to produce unwholesome karma. So when you're making an offering to an ordained practitioner or a teacher or somebody like this, you're practicing generosity. And you're practicing that generosity in order to help the teachings of the Buddha continue in the world. And the benefit for you is that you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment from your mind. This is the cause of discontentedness. When you're holding on to things very tightly, it's going to cause your mind to be discontent. You're going to be angry and frustrated, irritated, annoyed, and all these other discontent feelings. So you're training your mind through meditation, that when your mind moves off the breath, you're cutting that off, letting it go, and bringing the mind back to the breath. And there's other details you would need to know about meditation, but also practicing generosity is training your mind to give and share and let go, so you're not so selfish and holding on to things very tightly. So when you're practicing giving and sharing towards the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha, this is called merit, that you're producing merit. And there's this misunderstanding in the Buddhist community that if you make a gift to an ordained practitioner or a teacher, there's this little ceremony that they do where they pour this water. And this in Thai is called Wat Nam. If you've ever been around Thai people, they call it Wat Nam. And what they think is that when you make an offering, any benefits that you've accumulated, you're now transferring it to your relatives, particularly your dead relatives. But this isn't actually possible. If you understand the benefits of practicing generosity, which is giving and sharing and eliminating craving, desire, attachment from your own mind, you can't transfer those benefits to somebody else. It's not like dad can do all these unwholesome things in their life, and then their kids are going to now do a bunch of good deeds and now transfer that goodness to dad. It's just not possible, right? So this is what this particular chapter is pointing out, that this idea of Wat Nam, or transferring merit, it's a misunderstanding. That if you look at the original teachings of the Buddha, he actually teaches how when you make decisions, it produces results, either wholesome or unwholesome. And nobody else can create Dhamma for you. It's not possible for someone else to do something that creates Dhamma for you. It's your decisions that leads to any particular results. But this particular chapter, what it's doing is it's documenting where this misunderstanding comes from. And it's showing you exactly why this misunderstanding exists in the world. So this is explaining where the misunderstanding is coming from. And then ultimately it gets to the references and explains where these references are, because certain information has come into the world that has led people and misled them to believe that this particular practice is something that the Buddha taught, when in reality he didn't teach it. So we don't need to necessarily read that, but if you would like to read that on your own, you're welcome to read that. And then you've also got words from me as well. And then this is another one of those misunderstandings. This one is related to what we might refer to as holy water. In Thai, it's called namun. If you've ever been around ordained practitioners and they have this bowl of water and they have this candle and they drip wax into the candle, and then they take this kind of thing, it looks like the end of a broom, and they dip it in the water and then they sprinkle it on the people that are around. And the people think that, I got this water on me and now I'm kind of blessed, or I got this holy water. And the Buddha talks about this specifically during his lifetime. You can see it in his own words where he says he doesn't do this. And the reason why is that it promotes wrong view. That if you thought that you could do all these unwholesome things and unwise things in the world, and then you could just go to the temple and a monk sprinkle some water on you and now you're purified, you're not understanding the teachings of the Buddha, because you're training your mind. That's what's going to lead to any kind of beneficial results in your life. So you're going to see these kinds of things going on in temple environments. And it's helpful to be able to see the original words of the Buddha where he's teaching those things. And prior to this, in this particular book, it's shared from the words of the Buddha. But here, this one is just sharing where this misunderstanding comes from. So we don't necessarily need to read that in today's class, but you can read that on your own if you like. And then here's another misunderstanding that is being talked about, which is the recitation of teachings. That during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would recite teachings. They would chant the teachings. So like everything that I've said so far up to now, we've been in class for about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes. The students would remember those. And then every 2 weeks, they would chant them. So I doubt you guys would be able to chant the things that I've already shared as part of the class today, right? We just don't do that kind of thing today. We have books and videos and podcasts and things like this that capture it. You kind of are learning the meaning and the understanding of what I'm saying rather than remembering the actual words. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would remember the actual words and they would recite them and commit them to memory, word for word for word. And this is the only way that they could remember the teachings and then be able to practice them in their day-to-day life. Well, nowadays, Some people think that by chanting, there's kind of mystical or magical benefits to the actual chants, but there is no mystical, magical benefits to a chant. You can't chant something and then miraculously something's going to happen in your life. So if you've been taught that there's certain chants that you will get your boyfriend or girlfriend back if you say this chant, or you will get rich or wealthy if you say this chant, or you will get a new job or a new house, this isn't actually true. And you shouldn't believe anything that people say, and you shouldn't believe me either, that you can test these things for yourself. That if you go to a temple and they say, here's this particular chant, and if you chant this chant every day, you're going to get an extra long life, right? This is sometimes something that you can hear. Well, if somebody says that to you and they're like, hey, this is the secret chant that only our temple knows, and if you come to this temple every day and you chant this particular chant, you're going to get an extra long life. Well, you should be able to look around the temple and you should be able to see, like, there's a bunch of people who are 150 and 200 years old and 300 years old, right? And if you don't see that, then you know that this isn't true, that these are people just believing this kind of thing. And truly, if there was some chant that could produce a life of 150, 200, 300 years old, don't you think that would have spread like wildfire through the human population? We would all know that already, right? Or if there was some chant that we could chant and you would instantly get rich if you chanted this particular chant, that would have spread like wildfire through the community. Like the whole world would know that by now. We've had enough time, 2,500 years, for that kind of thing to spread. But these kind of things, they're just beliefs that people have, and it's actually taking you away from the true path to enlightenment, which is to cultivate wisdom and train your own mind. So that's why this is in the book series, to be able to help people to see where these misunderstandings come from, so that then you can understand what's really going to truly lead to enlightenment. Because what a Buddha does is they put lights down along the side of the path to make it more clear for people to understand what it takes to get to enlightenment. During the lifetime of a Buddha, they're laying these lights down along the path. But over 2,500 years, people have knocked over those lights, or some people have put them out. So the path to enlightenment has gotten more and more gray, or more and more murky. And what these book series does, and the classes and the things that I'm sharing with you guys, is helping to make that path more luminous for you so that you can see it more clearly of what it takes to get to enlightenment. So this particular chapter is explaining how the recitation of teachings doesn't lead to any particular mental state or any particular beneficial result. I shared with you guys the reason why I chant is to ease the mind into meditation. It helps you to get awareness of mind and awareness of the breath, and it helps you to get more benefit out of the meditation itself, but not the words. It's the action of actually chanting, because you need to remember the words and you need to monitor your breath and monitor your mind as you're starting to chant. This is what's actually producing the benefit with the chanting, but there's no mystical or magical benefits with that. So you can read that if you like. I've got some details for you there. But now this chapter 45, this is the words of the Buddha. So let's pick it up here where somebody can volunteer to read. As you see here, it's just kind of a short chapter, just kind of a page or so. Is there someone here at the temple or online that would like to volunteer to read this? Yes, ma'am. Oh, we got one here too. So maybe you can take this one. Yeah, go ahead and get the mic. You can take this one and you can take the next one. Yeah. Could you pass a mic up for this gentleman? Oh, he's got one. Never mind.
Reside with the teachings as your refuge. But have I not already declared, Ananda, that we must be parted, separated, and severed from all who are dear and agreeable to us? How, Ananda, is it to be obtained here? May what is born come to be, conditioned and subject to disintegration, not disintegrate. That is impossible. Therefore, Ananda, reside with yourselves as your own island, with yourselves as your own refuge, with no other refuge. Reside with the teachings as your island, with the teachings as your refuge, with no other refuge. And how, Ananda, does a monk reside with himself as his own island, with himself as his own refuge, with no other refuge, with the teachings as his island, with the teachings as his refuge, with no other refuge? Here, Ananda, a monk resides reflecting on the body as body. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings. He resides reflecting on mind as mind. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Those monks, Ananda, after I am gone, who reside with themselves as their own island, with themselves as their own refuge, with no other refuge, who reside with the teachings as their island, with the teachings as their refuge, with no other refuge, it is these monks, Ananda, who will be for me greatest of those dedicated to the training.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So let me give you guys a little bit of background on where this teaching is coming from, that the Buddha was so enlightened and so awake that he knew he was going to be dying, and he gave people a 3 months heads up that he was about to die. So he kind of announced to his community, like, hey, I'm going to be dying in 3 months, just to kind of let everybody know. And this was actually really wise of him, because anybody who was attached to him would have that 3 month period to kind of slowly kind of talk to him and, kind of let go of their attachment. So when the Buddha announced that he was going to be dying in 3 months, which actually happened, he died 3 months from the time that he said he was going to die, this particular student, Ananda, was attached to the Buddha, and he begged and pleaded with the Buddha not to die. Ananda was one of his closest students. He was with the Buddha for his entire 45-year teaching career. And this particular student, Ananda, was potentially his cousin or his brother-in-law. He was some relative of the Buddha, and he's actually credited for sharing the teachings, because after the Buddha died, he was the one who had the best memory of the teachings. So he's the one who came together with those 500 enlightened beings, and they documented the teachings. So if it wasn't for Ananda, we wouldn't actually have the teachings. But Ananda never got to enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha, because he was still attached to the Buddha himself. But shortly after the death of the Buddha, he ends up getting to enlightenment. Oftentimes when somebody dies, this is you getting confronted with this impermanence, and your mind will oftentimes eliminate its attachment when somebody dies, shortly thereafter. So Ananda was begging and pleading with the Buddha not to die. And the Buddha here says, but have I not declared, Ananda, that we must be parted, separated, and severed from all who are dear and agreeable to us? He's saying, hey, remember, I taught you the universal truth of impermanence, that I'm impermanent. Why are you attached to me, Ananda? Right? He's like essentially trying to help him to understand, like, hey, I've taught you that I am impermanent. I arise, I'm going to change, and I'm going to fade away. I'm going to die. And then he says, how, Ananda, is it to be obtained here? May what is born come to be conditioned and subject to disintegrate, not disintegrate. That is impossible. He's saying everything that is impermanent is going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. He's like, hey, I was born, so therefore I have to die, right? So his one of his close students was begging and pleading with him not to die, but he should already have known that of course the Buddha's going to die. He can't live forever. It's not possible. So the Buddha says, okay, Ananda, reside with yourself as your own island, meaning you're on your own independent journey to enlightenment. And then he says, with yourselves as your own refuge. What a refuge is protection, right? That if you have wisdom of what the Buddha taught, and you've trained your mind and purified your mind, you have this protection of your mind. He's saying, hey, I've shared the teachings with you. I've shared with you how to purify your mind. I've given you the wisdom that you need. When I die, use those teachings to be your protection. When you learn those teachings, you'll be able to protect your mind, and you won't be upset. You won't be angry. You won't be frustrated. So use the teachings as your refuge. That's your real protection. There's another discourse where the Buddha talks about people who are scared and get fearful. And he says how they retreat to the mountains, or they retreat to like a tree shrine or something like this. Maybe nowadays, if somebody was fearful, they might run to like a cabin in the mountains or something. And the Buddha says, you can do that if you like, but essentially that's not going to provide you protection. It's not going to provide you protection from your anger and your sadness and your frustration. It's your wise decision making that's going to provide you this protection. So that's essentially what he's talking about here as well. And then the Buddha says, okay, how do you reside with yourself as your own protection, this own refuge? But then he references the 4 foundations of mindfulness. These 4 foundations of mindfulness are something that you learn in the foundational teachings, that this is helping you to then get to enlightenment. So a lot of you guys haven't learned these 4 foundations of mindfulness yet. But for those of you guys that have, that's what he's referring to here, is that when you practice those 4 foundations of mindfulness, cutting off discontentedness as part of the bodily sensations, that's you protecting your mind, that you've protected your mind in that way. It's living with yourself as your own refuge. You don't have to depend on somebody else to protect your mind, but you can cut off those discontent feelings as a bodily sensation. And then he's saying, okay, Ananda, either now or after I'm gone, who reside with themselves as their own island, themselves as their own refuge, with no other refuge, who reside with their teachings, the teachings as their island, with the teachings as their refuge, with no other refuge. It is these monks, Ananda, who will be for me greatest of those dedicated to the training. So he's saying those who practice the teachings, those are the ones who are the most dedicated. Those are the ones who I can see are the most dedicated. Because if you can imagine during the lifetime of the Buddha, there's countless people who are going to be studying with that person. And not everybody's studying very deeply. Not everybody's understanding the teachings very deeply. But what he's sharing is those people who are dedicated to learning and growing and developing, they're the ones who are really dedicated and greatest. Because a Buddha is just interested in having their teachings preserved in the world. So those people who are dedicated to truly practicing them, that's going to help the teachings to be preserved in the world. So that's why the Buddha is saying those who are dedicated to the training, they're greatest for him, meaning they're the ones who are doing the most work to be able to preserve the teachings in such a way that countless people can then learn them and practice them. So any questions on this discourse? Anything you guys would like to discuss? Okay. All right, so let's move to the next one. Oh, yes. Yes, ma'am. Could you use the mic? Yep. That way the people online will be able to hear us.
What are some of the most effective ways to stop being attached to people that are close to us?
There's multiple things you can do, but the very best thing you can do is called reflecting on death or contemplation of death, where what you do is you kind of sit quietly somewhere and you close your eyes and you convince yourself that this person has died. So like say you're attached to your mom. Your mom's going to die at some point if she hasn't already. She's going to die. And when she dies, it can take you by surprise. It can feel like you're cut off at the knees or that someone's pulled the carpet out from under your feet. And you're not interested in that occurring. You would like to maintain your love and your appreciation and gratitude for your mom so you can actually confront her death before she actually dies. And the way you do this is through reflection of death or contemplation of death, where you close your eyes and you kind of envision that she's died. You don't aspire for her to die. You don't want her to die, but you just kind of live out as if she has died. Like envision like a doctor calling you or a police officer showing up at your house and informing you that your mom has now died. And now you kind of play that out in your mind. You're going to her funeral, you're planning, her funeral, maybe you're going to her house and you're sorting through her stuff and taking care of those kinds of things and taking care of anything it is that you would do as part of her death. You're not planning it and you're not sticking to that plan. What you're doing is you're just confronting death. You're contemplating it. You're reflecting on it as if it's actually happened. And now, when you do that, you'll probably grieve. You'll probably be sad because that craving is being triggered. That attachment is being triggered. And then you're going to have to cut that off and cut it off and cut it off. And you might be sad a little bit for like a week or two. But then after about, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, you'd like to do it again. And then now you're going to be less sad. And then after you regain your stability of your mind, then you do it again. And then you're going to be less sad and less sad. And maybe after 3, 4, 5, 6 times, you get to the point where you've come to terms with mom dying and it no longer causes any grief or sadness or misery because you've eliminated this craving, this desire for mom to be permanent. And you realize that she's impermanent. So there's other things too, but this is like the most impactful thing. There's a class that I teach called How to Eliminate Attachment to Those Who Are Closest to You, because that's one of the hardest attachments to eliminate is your parents, your brothers and sisters, if you have a life partner or children. These are very strong attachments that are in the mind. So you don't have to eliminate the relationship relationship. You just need to eliminate the craving in the mind. Sometimes people are confused and they think that the way to get to enlightenment is to go away from all your loved ones. And this isn't actually true. The Buddha did leave his family for a period of time, for 6 years, but then he ends up coming back to be around his family again. His wife, his stepmother, his son, his brother-in-law, all these people, they started ordaining with him. So he was around and he had relationships with plenty of people. So getting to enlightenment doesn't mean you don't have relationships. It just means that you're not attached to the people, craving for them to be a certain way. So this is one of the most impactful ways. It's called reflecting on death or contemplation of death.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great questions. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. We have a mic right here, or Steve will give you another one.
Doesn't the Buddha also talk about the Sangha or community as a refuge?
Yeah, so he talks about himself, the teachings, and the community as a refuge. This is the protection. And what he means by that is that's where you're going to learn the teachings. Because in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to have confidence in him. You're going to need to have confidence in his teachings or access to his teachings. And you'll need to be part of a community. Because you'll learn plenty from a teacher, but you also kind of learn from other students too. Not directly, but just kind of indirectly. Like if you're hanging out, like last night we had game night, right? We had some people here that we were playing games, and you might be like, oh wow, I really like how that person lost and they weren't angry, they weren't frustrated, they weren't agitated. Like, wow, I'd like to kind of practice some of that. Or maybe you see somebody who won and they weren't prideful, they weren't boastful, they weren't arrogant at all, and you're like, wow, that's pretty nice. I think I'm going to start practicing some of that. So this is how you learn from a community, is by being around other people, and you kind of see how people integrate the teachings. Maybe they're generous, maybe they're loving and kind and compassionate, and you start integrating that into your life. So having confidence in the Buddha, having access to his teachings, and being part of a community, you would need all three of those things to get to enlightenment. And you may not have confidence in the Buddha when you first get started. This is pretty common. But slowly but surely, as you learn his teachings and investigate and examine them, you'll gain more and more confidence as you see that they're actually working. But yeah, he talks about all three of these things as being a refuge or a protection, a way to protect your mind by training your mind.
But then when he mentions the teachings here as the only refuge, or yourself as the only refuge, does that mean that those are more important than the community? Or how does that?
Not necessarily. You'll see, like whenever you're looking at the teachings of the Buddha, you need to look at them in totality. That oftentimes we're studying just kind of an excerpt like this, and it's kind of leading you to think one particular way. But when you look at all of them in totality, you can see where he actually more frequently references taking refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. Here, he's talking about, okay, he's dying, right? So he's not talking about himself as a refuge anymore. He's talking about the teachings, and he's talking about yourself as basically make your own wise decisions. Don't rely on other people, because one of the big things that you have in the unenlightened state is conformity. The unenlightened mind will conform to what other people do. So if you, on your journey to enlightenment, if you conform to what other people do, you're not going to get to enlightenment, because the world is killing and stealing and having sexual misconduct and lying and taking intoxicants and things like this. And if you conform to that, there's no way you're going to get to enlightenment. So you need to see the wisdom in your own mind, not be a follower. Don't be a devotee of a teacher. You're not following me as a teacher. You're your own individual practitioner, and I'm just here as a tour guide pointing out to you, the things to learn and the things to grow and develop. But you're making the wise decisions because you see the wisdom in the teachings and you realize that, yes, this is wise for me. So that's why he's talking about yourself as your own island and kind of pointing that out to them. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
When you mentioned the path to enlightenment, there are thoughts came into my mind. Is that you mentioned enlightenment, it happened in your current life or after people die. I'm asking this question is because lots of people suffer from lots of things, and they try to reconcile with themselves that they are going to the heaven if they tolerate this kind of things, and they don't need to be happy in their current life. They just learn to reconcile with themselves. They tolerate the pain. Or another way to put it is that you're trying to find the wisdom inside you, and you try to live happily in when you live. It's not until you die. I just want to know the period. It's your current life or after you die.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate when people think like what you're describing, that some people that you've encountered, it's really unfortunate because people think like, okay, you know, it's okay if this life is miserable because after this, I'm going to get to something better. And they don't know that to be true at all. And the heavenly realm is not a permanent existence. Even if they got to the heavenly realm, they're still in the cycle of rebirth and they still need to get to enlightenment. So any work that you do in this life is going to benefit you in this life. And potentially you can get to enlightenment in this life and enjoy the rest of your life with the peace and the joy. No reason to suffer in this life thinking that something good's going to happen later. Instead, learn the wisdom in this life so that you can enjoy this life. That's what it means to get to enlightenment, that it's a mental state that you attain in this life. You can attain this mental state at death, but there, you didn't really get to enjoy it at all during your life. You were angry and frustrated and agitated throughout your life. You were annoyed. And okay, sure, you got to enlightenment at death, which is the next best thing. At least you're not going to be reborn. But you know, it's much better to dedicate time and effort and energy to getting to enlightenment now so you can enjoy it. And you can see your mind becoming more enlightened as you're training in these teachings. You can see it for yourself. So it's really unfortunate when people are kind of subjecting themselves to that kind of thing, but that's their choice and that's a choice they're making. But I would encourage you to choose to learn and practice and get to enlightenment in this life, and don't delay what it is that you're thinking to accomplish to some future life. That would be very unfortunate to do that. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. So I think you're going to read the next one, right? Yeah, you have a mic handy? That one sounds like it's got a little bit of feedback on it. Yeah, that one's pretty good though.
Okay. 4 criteria that assure the words of the Buddha. Suppose a monk were to say, "Friends, I heard and received this from the perfectly enlightened one's own lips. These are the teachings. This is the discipline. This is the master's teaching. Then, monks, you should neither approve nor disapprove of his words." Then, without approving or disapproving, his words and expressions should be carefully noted and compared with the suttas, discourses, and reviewed in the light of the discipline. If they, on such comparison and review, are found not to conform to the suttas or the discipline, the conclusion must be, assuredly this is not the word of the Buddha. It has been wrongly understood by this monk, and the matter is to be rejected. But where on such comparison and review they are found to conform to the suttas or the discipline, the conclusion must be, assuredly this is the word of the Buddha. It has been rightly understood by this monk. Suppose a monk were to say, "In such and such place there is a community with elders and distinguished teachers. I have heard and received this from that community." Then, monks, you should neither approve nor disapprove his words. Suppose a monk were to say, "In such and such a place there are many elders who are learned, bearers of the tradition, who know the teachings, the discipline, the training guidance." Suppose a monk were to say, "In such and such a place there is one elder who is learned. I have heard and received this from that elder." But where on such comparison and review they are found to conform to the suttas and the discipline, then the conclusion must be, assuredly this is the word of the Buddha. It has been rightly understood by this monk.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Studying with the original words of the Buddha is what's going to lead to your enlightenment. If you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So here, the Buddha is providing you guidance of how to figure out if something is his teachings or not, because you can't believe your way to enlightenment. And if you were studying teachings that weren't his teachings, then you're going to not be able to get to enlightenment. And the Buddha knew that from his lifetime until long into the future, there's going to be impermanence. There's going to be changes. People are making changes to his teachings. So he's giving you this guidance of how to figure out and cut through all that impermanence. And you'll see in other parts of his teachings where he teaches you not to believe his teachings, but you learn them, you reflect on them to independently verify it for yourself, and then you practice it. And this is how you cut through any kind of impermanence that might exist in the world about his teachings, because getting to his original teachings is what's going to lead to your enlightenment. So he's saying that if you hear a teaching from a monk or from an elder, don't approve it or disapprove it, but instead compare it to what the Buddha taught. And when you compare it to what the Buddha taught, if this particular thing is opposite of what the Buddha taught, the Buddha is saying ignore that it's not his teachings. But if you compare what somebody's sharing with you to his original teachings, and you can see the truth for yourself because you're making yourself as your own island, your own refuge, that you're doing the work yourself, your own independent journey, and you can independently verify that yes, this is indeed the teachings of the Buddha, then you can be assured that that's his teachings. And now you can learn them, reflect on them, and practice them. So gradually, slowly but surely, this is what you're able to accomplish to be able to cut through this 2,500 years of impermanence that we've experienced. So any questions on this chapter? Okay. So maybe what we'll do, let's see what the next one is. Maybe we'll just cover one more chapter. Yeah, let's just cover this one more chapter, and we'll finish up here because it's almost 11 o'clock. Is there someone who would like to read this? Like to go again?
Sure.
You did such a good job with the last one.
Thank you. The supreme honor and respect. Ananda, prepare me a bed between these twin salt trees, with my head to the north. I am sleepy and would like to lie down. Ananda, these salt trees have burst forth into an abundance of untimely blossoms, which fell upon the Tathagata's body, sprinkling it and covering it in homage. Divine coral tree flowers fell from the sky. Divine sandalwood powder fell from the sky, sprinkling and covering the Tathagata's body in homage. Divine music and song sound from the sky in homage to the Tathagata. Never before has the Tathagata been so honored, respected, appreciated, admired, and adored. And yet, Ananda, whatever male or female ordained practitioner, male or female household practitioner, resides practicing the teachings properly and perfectly fulfills the way of the teachings, he or she honors the Tathagata, has deep respect and appreciates him and pays him the supreme homage. Therefore, Ananda, we will reside practicing the teachings properly and perfectly fulfill the way of the teachings. This must be your goal and objective.
Okay, thank you very much. So here, this is a miracle that is the Buddha is not performing, but it's just happening as a result of the Buddha being there, that his student Ananda is making this bed, and now these trees burst out in blossoms that is unseasonably, and then there's this divine music, this sandalwood that is being sprinkled over the body of the Buddha. And rather than the Buddha having arrogance or ego and like, wow, look at me, ain't I so great? Instead, he turns it around, right? This is what a Buddha is going to do. He turns it around and turns it into a teaching that helps his student to be able to understand, like, hey, look at all this respect that is being kind of bestowed upon him as a Buddha. Well, if you really would like to respect me, the way to respect me is to practice my teachings. That's what he's sharing. Then he eventually gets to this where he says, and yet Ananda, whatever male or female ordained practitioner, male or female household practitioner, resides practicing the teachings properly and perfectly, fulfills the way of the teachings, he or she honors the Tathagata, has deep respect and appreciates him and pays him the supreme homage. So this is more impactful or more significant for a Buddha than this miracle that is being performed, right? Like the Buddha could care less about this miracle that was just performed in his presence. Instead, he's interested in seeing people learn and practice the teachings because that's what's going to lead to a peaceful and joyful life for you. So the Buddha was asked on different occasions, like, how can we respect you? He says, learn and practice the teachings. That's the way to respect someone, because a teacher who's sharing these teachings, they're not doing it for their benefit. Right? A teacher isn't doing it for their benefit. If they're teaching, they're either enlightened or very close to enlightenment, and they're just helping other people to get to that same mental state. So a way to honor and respect that particular person is to learn and practice their teachings, and then that way they can be preserved in the world in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment. So that's what the Buddha is doing here, is he's kind of turning this around, because he doesn't have ego, he doesn't have arrogance, right? He's not trying to say, look at me, look how great I am, look at this miracle that was just performed because of me. No, he turns it around. He says, this is about you getting to enlightenment. So the Buddha doesn't put God in the central focus in his teachings, for example. He puts you as the central role in his teachings, because you're the one who's learning and practicing and developing on the path. So this is an interesting discourse where you can see the Buddha not having ego and being interested in his students learning and practicing. You can also see here that word that I was referring to is the Tathagata. This is how he referred to himself most frequently. The word Tathagata means the one who shares the truth, or the one who discovers the truth, the one who teaches the truth. That essentially is what the word Tathagata means. Okay, so any questions on this one? Okay. So I'll end here by just thanking all of you guys for joining. If you're interested in the additional chapters that we didn't cover, you can see those in the book. This is volume 12 that we've been studying today. This afternoon, starting at 1 o'clock, I have an introduction to the Teachings of the Buddha class. We're going to be doing meditation starting at 1, and then I'm going to introduce students to the Teachings of the Buddha kind of from afar, and then we're going to go in and penetrate into the very first teaching. It's called the Four Noble Truths. This is the very beginning of the path to enlightenment. So if you're interested in kind of looking at the teachings of the Buddha from afar and kind of understanding what they are in relationship to the things that you see in the world, and then understanding the very first teaching, you're welcome to join at 1 o'clock, either here or online. We're going to start with meditation, and then we'll finish up around 4 o'clock. And then tomorrow we have our group learning program, which we're going to be studying chapter 3 in volume 1, which chapter 3 is titled Enlightenment. What is enlightenment? This is where I'm going to be describing enlightenment, the 4 stages of enlightenment, and other aspects of enlightenment. You're always welcome to join that. We start with meditation, and then you'll see me teaching in a more traditional way. This afternoon too, it's a more traditional style of teaching, where this is more of a study group. And then on Monday, we have the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment course, where for 5 days, I'm going to be helping students to develop a foundation in the path to enlightenment. So you can join that here. You can join it online. You can watch the recordings. You can get access to all these books and other things that you like. And if you have any questions for me, you're welcome to let me know. But I'd like to just thank you for coming to the temple and deciding today is the day that you'd like to learn the teachings of the Buddha. So perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a lovely, wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap. Thanks to everyone online as well. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.